Hello and welcome to another video. My name is Eve, I'm a 3D artist and illustrator, and today I'll show you how to make this cute character in grease pencil. We'll also make a basic animation for him. By the end of this video, you'll be comfortable enough with grease pencil so you can start using it on your own. In this video, you'll learn how to use the grease pencil tools as we go along, but I also recommend you watch my grease pencil basics tutorial before you try this one. This way you'll be more familiar with the tools. Okay, without further ado, let's get started. First, let me quickly explain what grease pencil does. Grease pencil is a type of Blender object that allows you to draw in 3D space. Grease pencil can be used to make traditional 2D animation, motion graphics, or even storyboards. You can also use grease pencil in combination with your 3D models. Grease pencil objects are constructed of strokes, which are in turn constructed of points. We'll touch more on that later. Now let's set up our Blender scene. Open up Blender. When you first open it, you'll see this window. Today we'll be using this 2D animation preset that will set up a grease pencil object and some materials for us automatically. Click on 2D animation to start. Before we start working, let's just enable some shortcuts that will make our lives easier. Go to Edit, Preferences, and then go into Key Map. Here you want to enable Tab for Pie Menu, as well as Extra Shading Pie Menu items. After that, go down here and save your preferences. Enabling these allows you to access all of the editing modes by just pressing Tab. The first thing we'll have a look at today is grease pencil layers. Click on this icon here to go into the Data tab. Here on the top you have all of your grease pencil layers. Layers is how you organize your scene into different parts. For example, when making a character, you want to have the body on one layer, the head on a separate one, the mouth on another one, etc. From the plus sign here you can add new layers, and from the minus you can remove layers. From these arrows here, you can reorder the layers. Layer order affects which strokes are visible on the top. From this middle arrow here, you can duplicate, lock, and merge layers. For now, let's just delete the default layers that Blender has created. To do that, click on this minus sign. We'll add our own layers now. Click on New Layer here to add a layer. Double-click on the name and call it Body. This will be for the body of our character. Next, let's add a material for the body. Click on this icon here to go into Material Properties. Here we'll create a new material. To do that, click on the plus sign. Then click on New. By default, stroke is enabled. Leave it as it is. That just gives an outline to whatever you draw. Here we also want to enable fill and choose an orange color. Enabling fill will automatically fill our shapes with our selected color. Now let's test what that looks like. With the draw tool selected, set the strength to 1 from here. Now when you draw something on your canvas, you can see that it uses the new material with the orange fill inside. Now let's make the body of our character. Press Ctrl Z to undo your last stroke. Then click here to choose the circle tool. After that, hold down Shift and left mouse click to draw your circle. Press Enter to accept the stroke. Nice, now we have the shape for the body. The good thing about using materials for your different colors is that you can change the material even after you've drawn something. So if you go back into the material properties and change the color of the fill, you can see that that affects what we've drawn in our scene. This is a really great and non-destructive way of working, and it's great if you want to adjust your colors after you've drawn something. You can also disable your stroke here or change its color from the material menu. Okay, now we're done with the body. Next, let's make the stem. Go into the Data tab. Click on plus to add a new layer. Name it Stem. Then go back into Material Properties and click on the plus sign to add a new material. Then click on New. Leave the stroke properties as they are and then enable Fill. For the color, choose a nice green. After this, choose the Draw tool. From the Stroke menu, enable Stabilize Stroke. decrease the radius here. After that, draw a stem on the top of the head. Nice, that's looking good. We can adjust the shape of this later. Now we want to move the stem behind the body. To do that, go into the Data tab. To reorder them, just click on this arrow here. Nice, that's looking good. If you're enjoying the video so far, please take the time to leave me a comment and a like. This really helps me feed the algorithm gods and it gets my video out to more people. Thank you! Okay, now let's add another layer so we can make a leaf. Click on the plus sign here to add a new layer. Double click it and name it leaf. After that, go into material properties. Click on the plus sign to add a new material. Then click on new. Enable fill on this new material and choose a dark green color. Now select the draw tool and draw half a leaf shape next to the stem. After that, click on this button here to enable auto merge. That will merge strokes that are close to each other. Now you can draw the other half of the leaf. Doing this in two halves allows you to have sharp points at both ends. Now let's say you're not happy with this shape. There's two ways to edit it. You can go into edit mode or sculpt mode. Let's have a look at edit mode first. Press tab and go into edit mode. Press 1 for point selection. Here you can grab individual or multiple points along your stroke and move them around with G. Alternatively, what I prefer doing is using sculpt mode. Sculpt mode is just much faster and easier to use. Press tab and go into sculpt mode. Here you can use the push and grab brushes to move your lines around. In this mode, you can press F to increase or decrease the size of your brush. However, if we try to move the leaf around now, you can see that it affects the body shape as well. To make sculpt mode only affect the active layer, go into the Data tab. Then from this middle arrow, choose Auto Lock in Active Layers. This allows you to only work on your active layer and it locks everything else. Now when you use these sculpt tools, they only affect the leaf. I use the push brush to shape the leaf a bit nicer. After that, I press tab and go into edit mode. I select all the points on the leaf. I do that by choosing one point on the leaf and then I press L to select all the linked points. After that, I scale down the leaf with S and position it to the side with G and X. After that, in the layers menu, I click on the down arrow to move the leaf below the body. Now let's move on to the eyes. In layers, click on the plus to add a new layer for one of the eyes. Name it left eye white. Here we'll separate the white of the eye and the pupil on separate layers. This way we can animate those separately and more easily. Click on the Material Properties tab. Here I've named all my materials so I can quickly tell them apart. Now let's add a new material. Click on the plus to add it. Disable the stroke and enable fill. Set the fill color to white. Make sure to name this new material as well. Now press tab and go into draw mode. Select the circle tool. Hold down shift and make a circle. Press enter to accept the stroke. Now press tab and go into edit mode. Select one point on the circle. Then press L to select all other linked points. Move the eye into position with G and Z and G and X. I'm also scaling it down with S. Nice, once you're happy with the position, let's duplicate this layer. Click on the middle arrow and choose duplicate. Since we have all the points selected, we can move this second eye. Press G and X to move it to the side. Name this new layer so we can tell the two eyes apart. Here I just want to take a quick break to give a big shout out to all my patrons. Thanks to everyone supporting me on Patreon, I can continue making these tutorials and more. If you enjoy my tutorials, consider becoming a patron. I post exclusive tutorials over there, like this one and many more, as well as behind the scenes of my animation project, The Magical Adventures of Gizmo and Oz. The link will be in the description if you want to join. Okay, now back to the tutorial. Now let's make the irises. We're going to repeat the exact same process that we did for the eyes. We're not going to do anything new here, just doing the exact same steps as we did before. I'm going to speed up the video at this stage, and if you need to, feel free to slow it down and you can follow along. I'm still going to explain what I'm doing. I make a new layer for one of the irises. Then I make a new material. I enable fill on the material and make it black. I use the circle tool to make a circle. I position the circle in the white of the eye. Then I go into edit mode and move the iris in the middle. Once I'm happy with the position, I duplicate the layer. I rename the new layer. Then I grab the points of the second iris and move it to the side with G and X. I do the exact same process for the highlights of the eyes. I make new layers for each highlight. I make the ovals with the circle tool without holding down Shift. Here, if you want to select multiple layers at the same time, go to the middle arrow. Uncheck Auto Lock Inactive Layers. This allows you to select points on multiple layers at the same time. Now you can grab all the eye layers and move them together if you need to. Okay, once you're happy with the positions of the eyes, we can move on to the mouth. In the Data tab in Layers, click on the plus sign to add a new layer. Name it Mouth. Press Tab and go into Draw mode. Choose the Draw tool. From the Material menu, choose the Solid Stroke material. Here you can press F to increase or decrease the size of your brush. Then draw on the mouth like this. Let me show you how you can adjust the thickness of the stroke after you've drawn it. Press Tab and go into Edit mode. Select the point on the mouth and then select all the linked points by pressing L. After that, you can press Alt-S to make the stroke thinner or thicker. That's a nice way to adjust the thickness of your strokes after you've drawn them. Next, let's make some highlights. In the Material tab, add a new material. Rename it. Then disable Stroke and enable Fill. Set the fill color to yellow. After that, go to the Data tab. Add a new layer and name it Highlights. Then press Tab and go into Draw mode. Using the Circle tool, draw two circles next to each other. Make one bigger and one smaller. After that, press Tab and go into Edit mode. Select both circles and rotate them with R. Next, we're moving on to the details and the eyebrows. I'm going to speed this next part up so the tutorial doesn't end up too long. I'm doing the exact same steps that we did for the eyes. I make a new layer for each eyebrow, then I make a dark orange material. I make the right eyebrow with the circle tool. Then I rotate this eyebrow in edit mode. I duplicate this layer with the eyebrow. Then I make sure that Auto Lock Inactive is enabled. I select all points on the duplicated layer by pressing A, and then press S, X and type in -1 to flip the eyebrow. I then position this eyebrow with G and X. After that, I make a new layer and call it Details. I use the same dark orange material and draw some circles on the cheeks. Once again, there's nothing special here, I'm just following the exact same steps that we did before. Next, let's add a shadow on the body. To do that, add a new layer. Name it Body Shadow. Then, using the Draw tool and the dark orange material, draw a shadow shape on the bottom here. Now we're going to add a mask to this shape, so it doesn't go outside of the body boundary. To add a mask, select the shadow layer and enable mask from here. Expand the mask menu from this arrow. Then click on the plus sign and choose the body layer. This creates a sort of clipping mask on top of the body. So now the shadow only covers the body. Now let's press Tab and go into sculpt mode to adjust the shape of the shadow. Here you want to enable Auto Lock Inactive Layers. Move the shadow layer up so the shadow can be seen. Adjust the shape of the shadow in sculpt mode. Here we're just trying to make sure that it just doesn't clip the lines on the body. Another way to do this would be to have the body color and body outline on two different layers. This way you can put the shadow between both of them. So you'd have the body outline layer on the top Then you would have the body shadow layer sandwiched in between, and then on the bottom you would have the body color. But for the sake of this tutorial, we're just quickly moving the shadow in sculpt mode. That also works. Nice, that's the shadow all done. Next, let's make another layer for the leaf detail. In material properties, click on the plus to add a new material. Make the stroke a dark green color. After that, press tab and go into draw mode. Using the draw tool, draw some lines like this. Once you're done, let's adjust the thickness of the lines. Press tab and go into edit mode. Here you can fine-tune the shape of the lines. Select the bottom point here and move it with G so it doesn't clip. Then you can also make the endpoints thinner by pressing Alt S. Nice, that's looking good. Now let's move on to the arms. In the Data tab, go to the Layer section. Click on the plus sign to add a new layer. Name it Left Arm. After that, press Tab and go into Draw mode. From this menu, choose the solid stroke material. Then press F and adjust your brush size. Draw the arm like this. Then press Tab and go into Edit mode. Select the end point on top of the arm here. Make sure that Auto Lock Inactive Layers is turned on. After that, turn on Proportional Editing from this button. Now press Alt S to make the top of the arm thicker. Here you can scroll up or down on the mouse to change the area that Proportional Editing affects. I'm just making the top of the arm a bit thicker than the bottom. Now we want to move the arm layer behind the body. To do that, go to Layers. Then with the arm layer selected, click on this arrow to move it down below the body. Nice. Now let's duplicate this arm and flip it to the other side. Select the arm layer and from the middle arrow, choose Duplicate. Rename your layer. Press Tab and go into Edit mode. Select all the points by pressing A. Then to flip the stroke, press S, X and then type in -1 on your keyboard. That flips the arm to the other side. Now move the second arm to the other side with G and X. Nice, that's the arms all done. Next, let's move on to the legs. In Layers, make a new layer for the left leg. Name it appropriately. After that, press Tab and go into Draw mode. Select the Line tool from here. Then hold down Shift to create a straight line like this. Press Enter to accept the stroke. After that, make a second line for the foot like this. Press Enter to accept this stroke as well. Now let's adjust the shape of the foot. Click your middle mouse button to go into 3D view. Then press Tab and go into Edit mode. Select all the points on the foot. Rotate it by pressing R and Z. Then position it so it's still connected to the leg with G and X. Move it a bit forward with G and Y. Now press numpad 0 to go back into the front flat view. As you can see, the foot is slightly facing forward now, which makes the character look less flat. Next, I just adjust the thickness on the top of the leg like we did on the arm. I select the top points in edit mode. Then I turn on proportional editing from here. I scale up the top points with Alt and S. That gives us some nice variation in the thickness. Nice, now the leg is all done. Let's duplicate it to the other side. In the Layers menu, click on the middle arrow and duplicate the leg layer. Make sure that Auto Lock Inactive Layers is enabled. Select all the points by pressing A. Then press S, X and type in -1. That flips the leg to the other side. Move it to the side by pressing G and X. Nice, now our character is done. We can move on to animating it next. This is a good point to save a version of your scene from File, Save As. Make sure to always have a non-animated version of your character so you can go back to it if you need to. Okay, now let me show you how to do some basic animation in Grease Pencil. I won't be going into too much detail as there is so much to learn about animation and it would make this video super long. Instead, I'll show you just the basics that you need to get started. How we've set up our layers is really nice because we can easily animate the separate parts of the character. By having each body part on a separate layer, it's easy to adjust things one by one. If everything was drawn on the same layer, things would be very difficult to select and animate. So we've set ourselves up nicely to start animating. So now let's say you want to animate this left arm. Select the left arm layer. Then enable auto lock inactive layers from here. This ensures that you're only affecting the left arm. Now press Tab and go into edit mode. Select all the points on the arm. Let's do a little wave animation. That means our hand has to go from this neutral position to all the way up. If you look down here, you have your timeline. This is where you add and manage all of your keyframes. Your keyframes store the position of all of your grease pencil elements. On frame 0, we already have the default pose stored. The default pose is the character with the arms down, how we drew it. So let's move the time slider here to frame 10. By default, in the 2D animation mode, Blender has auto keying enabled. You can see it enabled here. What that does is it will record every change that you make into a keyframe. So now we want to move the arm into an up position. Press R, X and type in 180. That flips the arm upside down. Then move the arm up with G and Z and then rotate it by pressing R. Because we have auto keying enabled, Blender has now made a keyframe of all these changes on frame 10. Now if you scroll between frame 0 and 10, you can see that our arm moves. What you see here in green is called onion skinning. Onion skinning shows you the previous and next frames of your animation so you can track how your objects are moving. It helps with creating continuity and smooth arcs. You can enable or disable onion skinning from this button here on each layer. Let's just add a slight bend to the arm as well. To do that, you can use sculpt mode. Press Tab and go into sculpt mode. Using the push brush, add a curve to this stroke. Being able to use sculpt mode to animate in grease pencil is by far one of my favorite features. Now if you scroll between frames 0 and 10, you can see how the arm moves. At the moment though, the movement is quite stiff. To make it more natural, we need to add what is called an in-between keyframe. Let's do that now. Move the time slider to frame 5. Here we want to make a pose that is a halfway between the two extremes. To do that, press Tab and go into edit mode. Select all the points on the arm by pressing A. After that, press Ctrl E. That makes an in-between pose of the previous and next frame automatically. Here on the onion skinning, you can see the previous and next frame. Place this arm somewhere in the middle. Now you can see that our animation looks a lot better. There's also an automatic way to make more in-betweens in Blender with interpolation. Let me show you how. Right-click the keyframe we made on frame 5 and delete it. Now our arm movement is stiff again. After that, select frame 0 and shift-select frame 10. Then go to the grease pencil menu here and choose Interpolate Sequence. This automatically adds in-between keyframes between the two frames that you have selected. When I play the animation now, you can see that the movement is much nicer and the arm rotates accurately based on the start and end position. So that is how you interpolate keyframes in Blender. Let's just press Ctrl Z to undo that now. I'll just show you some more keyframe basics. You can move your keyframes around by selecting them and then using the left mouse button to drag them. The bigger gap that you have between your keyframes, the slower your animation will be. So if they're closer together, your animation will be faster. That's just a basic principle with keyframe animation. Another cool thing you can do with grease pencil is you can add new strokes on each keyframe. Let me show you how. Move the time slider to frame 15. Now press Tab and go into draw mode. Using the draw tool, draw a heart above the hand. When we play it back now, you can see that a heart appears. However, our arm disappears. This is because we did the heart on the arm layer. Instead of that, press Ctrl Z to undo that. After that, make a new layer. Name it Heart. Then, while still being on frame 15, you can draw a new stroke on this layer. Now both our arm and our heart are appearing in the same place. You can add new strokes to your animation at any point. Let's do another quick animation example. Let's say you want to animate your character talking. To do that, in the Data tab, select the mouth layer. Then press Tab and go into Draw mode. Scroll to the frame you want to put a keyframe on. Now you just need to draw a new mouth shape. Now when you scroll between the two frames, you can see that the mouth moves. So that is how you would go about animating the mouth moving. You can also scroll to another frame and add another mouth shape, but that is essentially the principle. And as a final step, I'll show you how to export your animation as a video. Click on this icon to go into Output. In resolution, you can set the size that you want your video to be. I leave mine at 1080 by 1920. Then from frame range, you can set which section of your timeline you want to be rendered. In this case, I set the start frame to 1 and the end frame to 30. That's just where my animation ends. After that, from file format, you can set the output format. If you're rendering a really long animation sequence, I recommend choosing PNG here. This way, each frame of your animation renders as a separate image. Then you can combine those separate images into a video in a software like After Effects or Final Cut. The reason for rendering as separate images is if your render crashes halfway through, which annoyingly sometimes happens, you won't lose all of your rendering progress. So that's something to keep in mind if you're rendering a long sequence. Since we're rendering a really light short sequence, I just choose this video format for now. This will directly render to a video file. After that, from Output, you can choose where you want your animation to be stored on your computer. Then when you're done setting all that up, you can go to Render and then choose Render Animation. That will save your animation to your chosen destination. And that is everything for this tutorial. If you're interested in diving deeper into Grease Pencil, you can find an extended version of this tutorial on my Patreon. In this exclusive Patreon video, I demonstrate how to combine Grease Pencil with 3D characters as we create the same orange character, but this time in 3D. If you want to join my Patreon, the link is below. Here, I want to thank my Master Wizard patrons. You guys have helped me so much with developing these videos and my animation project, so a big thank you to you. And that is everything for this video. If you have any questions about Grease Pencil, feel free to leave me a comment below and I'll do my best to help. Thank you for watching, until next time!